Today we are doing what is called a pop art image. We're going to take a photograph and we're going to turn it into a cartoon. So the first thing we need to do is make sure we have a good quality image. So after you download your image, following the Google Images directions, which means that hopefully you've already predetermined that this image is the proper size, okay? But you definitely want to double check it just in case. So you're going to go to image size, and you are going to look at the pixels. It needs to be a minimum size of 1024 by 768. That is 1024 by 768. And we see here that this is 1920 pixels by 1200 pixels. So we're good to go. This is a good quality image. Okay. The next step now is we need to duplicate this layer. And we are going to call this Invert. So we're just going to name this Invert. Click OK. So now we're going to come up here to Image Adjustments, and we are going to go to Invert. Alright, yes, this should look like this. Yes, you are doing this correct. The next step is we need to blur this slightly. So we're going to come up here to Filter. We're going to go to Blur, Gaussian Blur. We're going to type in 7 here. And we want to just blur this image slightly. Okay. Alright. So now what we have to do is we have to put what is called a blending mode on this image. That is under this little word normal. Okay, you're going to notice that if you click on normal, you have lots of different options. You're going to come down to color dodge. Okay, yes, this is how your image should look. Yes, this is correct. Okay. The next step is to put a threshold adjustment layer on. So you're going to click on our little half circle that is half with white and half with black, and you're going to select threshold. Okay, and we are going to type in 240. Okay, here we go, 240. And look at that and see if maybe you want to bring it down slightly or up a little bit. I think we want to see good details in the eyes, the lips, the face. So I will put this back up just slightly to like 239, I think actually works. Okay. Alrighty. So now you have 3 layers here. Yes, 3 layers. Okay. The next layer we're going to add is a brand new blank layer. It looks right here. It's called Create a New Layer. It's like a little paper with the corner turned up. You are going to click on that, and we're going to double click on layer 1, and we're going to rename that to Skin. Because what we're going to do is we're going to paint in her skin tone. But what we need to do is come over here and select from our color palette. So we're going to click on that color palette. We're going to use our color picker, and we're going to pick a nice skin tone, not too yellow, not too red, kind of a nice healthy looking skin tone. And I'm just going to paint that in here really quick and see how that looks. Just zoom in, Control plus. Looks pretty good. So now I'm going to adjust the blending mode again. Yes, the blending mode. I'm going to click on normal here. This time I'm going to call that multiply. And what happens is that makes it go so that it becomes transparent. So even though the color is showing up, it gets rid of it. You can still paint the color, but it allows you also to see what's underneath the color. So it shows all the black and white texture from underneath, or at least the black texture on her face here. So we're going to go in and we're going to make sure that we are using a nice brush here, a nice soft brush. And we want to use the one in the very left corner. And we're just going to paint this in. Now, if you use your bracket keys on your keyboard, the bracket keys, you can make your brush larger or smaller. So I'm just going to use my bracket keys to make it a little bit bigger so that I can kind of paint this in a little faster. I want to make sure that my opacity is set at 100%. Nice soft brush. And I'm going to just paint this in, but I want to avoid her lips. I'm also going to end up going in around her eyes a little closer with like a more careful brush. I'm going to come down here and carefully paint this in, and I'm going to come in with a brush a little more precisely around her lips. Alrighty, just carefully going around. Because it's at 100%, it's just doing 100% paint job here. I'm going to use my bracket key and I'm going to zoom in. Control plus is what you use to zoom in. Control plus, coming around. So you have to be really careful around the edges. That's part of her ear, so I'm going to paint that in. And we are just coloring like we would when we were in elementary school and we were coloring on a coloring book. We're just coloring this in here. Coloring around her eye. We want to make sure we keep the whites of her eyes nice and white. And her eye balls, her iris and her pupils white as well. We don't want to paint. And we're going to just carefully go around her lips now. The edge of her lips, because we're going to end up painting her lips a different color. Going around the edge and making sure it's all filled in. And carefully around her lips. If you need to see what you're doing a little more clearly, you can turn off your layers. You can turn off your threshold layer and your invert layer, and you can just kind of paint carefully around the lips. That is one way. Turn that back on again, back on again. So that's an option if you feel like you need to like carefully see where you're painting. I need to fill in her neck here. Make my brush a little bigger. This is going to be set using the bracket key. I'm going to make my brush a little bigger, make my brush a little smaller. Yep, make my brush a little smaller. And make sure this is nicely filled in. Alrighty. Let's back out. Okay, so now that is her entire face. Okay. That's the only skin I see. So we have gloves on. She's wearing gloves, so I'm not going to paint her hands. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create what's called a halftone effect. Okay, so to do that, I have to go to my background layer, and I need to duplicate that layer. And I'm going to call it hair. Now, you don't have to use a traditional hair color at all, okay? I'm now going to move that to the top. Yes, move that to the top. In fact, I'm going to use green, okay? I'm going to use green. I'm going to go with it. And it needs to be kind of a mid-tone. It can't be too light, can't be too dark, kind of in the middle here. And I'm going to say, okay. And we want to make sure you have white underneath your, this is your foreground color. You need to make sure your background is white, okay? Otherwise, this will not work. All right, so we have our colors. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come up to Filter. We're going to go to Filter Gallery. We are going to click on Sketch. We're going to come down to Halftone. And you are going to set your size to 2. And your contrast can be anywhere from 50 down to like 35 or so. You just have to figure out what you think looks better. So do you want to have a more, I think I want to have the contrast be about 40, I think. That's good. So anywhere between 30 and 40. And then you click OK. And again, we need to do a blending mode of multiply. Okay. So now we go control plus, and zoom in. We are going to want to remove some of this green. All right, and how we do that is we put a layer mask on this layer. We click right here on the little square with the black circle in the middle. And we want to make sure our layer mask is activated. Then we're going to come over here and use a brush. We need to make sure that black is over white. And we want to remove everything. So we want to have the opacity. Not everything. We want to leave this green shadow on her face. We want to leave the green on her hair. But what we do want to remove is this background, okay? Because we're going to paint in the background with a different color, okay? So I'm going to go control plus. And I'm going to remove that. And just kind of around the edges here. Make my brush a little bit. This is 100% removal, so I've got my opacity at 100%. Let's see here. That looks pretty good there. And then I'm going to move this way, and I'm going to take it off of here. And all of this off. Okay. A little bit here on the bottom. I'm going to leave a little bit of green along the edge. Definitely the green all in here, because what it does is it kind of gives it a value tone effect with these halftone lines, little squares, I guess you could say. They're like little halftone squares. We're going to leave it in the hair. We're going to leave it in the fur. I'm going to leave it here as well. I'm going to back out, control minus. Okay. If for some reason you take too much off, let's say you take that off and you go, you know, I really want some of that back. What you want to do is reverse this. You want to do white over black, and then we can just put that right back in again. Okay? The next step is we're going to paint in the background. So we're going to add a brand new layer here on that little paper with the turned up corner, and we're going to double click on the layer, and we are going to call it background. Alrighty. And now we're going to, what you're going to be doing for your background color is the complementary color on the color wheel. So I highly recommend you go back and refer to your Elements and Principles notes on color, because the complementary color to green is red. The complementary color to blue is orange. The complementary color to yellow, which you wouldn't use yellow, by the way, for your halftone effect, because it doesn't work very well. You'd have to do like a brown color. So I would recommend that instead of doing yellow, I would do a violet for your halftone effect, and then do a yellow on your background. Okay? Again, we're going to set that to multiply. And I'm going to zoom in, control plus, and I'm going to move over, and I'm going to be really careful as I get close to this edge here. Make my brush smaller. Going to draw that in very carefully here. along this edge. If I make a mistake, I can always go and undo it. See how that's kind of overlapping? I can't say I really like that. So I'm going to go to my window, history, and I'm going to undo that step. Alrighty. And now I'm going to go over to this side and I'm going to continue filling this in here. I'm just going around the edge. It'll make it easier when I go to like paint it. Now I can make a much larger brush and fill that in really quickly, just like that. Make my brush a little smaller, fill that in here. Keep filling it in. Come up and make sure I got the top. I gotta do this little top corner right here. Okay, and I'm gonna back out Control minus. Okay, let's move my history over. I'll just close that up for now. I can always reopen it right there. Alrighty. So now I'm gonna create a new layer. I'm gonna call it gloves. Now the next color I use is going to be more of an analogous color on the color wheel, so something that's closer to green but not quite green. I'm going to go with a yellow, okay? So I'm going to pick yellow here, kind of a yellowish green color, okay? And change that to multiply again. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Multiply, there we go. And now I'm going to carefully Control plus, zoom in a little bit here. Move this over and move this down. I'm going to carefully color in the gloves. So I chose this color because it complements the green, but it's still quite a different color. It's more of a kind of a chartreuse, a chartreuse green, something similar to a sweater I had in the 80s. Yeah, when neon colors were really popular. All right, let's make this little smaller, and then I'm going to keep painting that in just as I go along here and making sure I'm getting, in fact, if I want to turn off my threshold and my invert, I can see exactly where my gloves are to make sure that I'm staying in the proper lines of the glove. And then threshold and invert back on again. This time I'm going to come over to this side and fill this in, going along the edge. Again, if you make a mistake, undo it, okay? Undo it. And just, if you make a mistake and you can't undo it because you didn't go back on your history soon enough, you can always use this eraser tool right here to erase something that you don't like, okay? And then go back to your paintbrush and continue, okay? So keep that in mind. You can always use the eraser tool as well to just remove something you don't like and then redraw over it, okay? That works as well. Control minus, let's go out. Okay, so now I want to remove, I'm going to work on her eyes, but I really need to go back on my layer mask and remove the green from her eyes and also the whites. Okay, so I want to make sure that the whites of her eyes are really white and that the pupil and the iris is also white. So I'm going to remove this green from here because I'm going to be working on the eyes now. Alrighty, so let's back out, Control minus. Okay. And then I'm going to come over here and add a new layer. I'm going to call it lips. No, eyes. I'm not doing the lips quite yet. I'm going to do them next. Okay. So I'm going to make her eyes like a blue, a really light blue color. Okay, and again I'm going to change that to multiply. I'm going to zoom in really close so I can really do this very precisely and just paint the iris, just the iris, not the whites. Just the iris. Perfect, perfect. Good, good, good. Control minus. Alrighty, and then I'm going to do her lips next, so let's call that lips. Again, picking a new layer mask here, and this time I'm also going to remove this green halftone off her lips. I don't want it on her lips. Okay, so I'm going to go Control plus, zoom in really close, make sure I got that green halftone off her lips. Alrighty. Okay, and I'm going to go to my threshold and invert and just kind of follow this lip line a little more here. Okay, so now I'm going to pick a really fun, bright pink color, I think. And I'm going to click on lips, make sure we're on my lips layer, and I'm going to change that to multiply again. And it went to blue, so that's because I was changing the color when I was on my hair layer, which is not what you want to do, okay? You want to make sure you're back on your lips layer, and then I'm going to come over here and click that nice pink color, and I got multiply, and now I'm going to follow the lip line here and follow it. And I'm going to turn on the layer just to make sure this looks okay. Turn on these layers. There we go. And I need to fill this in some more. I'm going to back out, Control minus. There we go. Alright, she's got some really bright pink lips and some beautiful blue eyes. And then the last thing I want to paint is her jacket. Okay, so I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to call it hood. Actually, it's a hood. It's great texture. I love this hood. It's a furry hood. And I'm going to make it kind of this green color. Let's see here. But I'm going to make it lighter. I'm going to make a lighter version of this green, okay? And then I'm going to change that to multiply, and I'm going to paint this in so that she's got like 2 value tones of green in her jacket, which is going to make this so much more interesting than just a white jacket or just one solid green hooded jacket. And this does not have to be realistic at all. In fact, the more wonky you get with the colors, the better this is, okay? This is a cartoon. And so I'm using a pretty big brush right now to kind of fill in like the middle section. I'm going to go in with, and what's cool is you can go over the darker green and it doesn't really impact it at all. It looks great. So now I'm going to go in a little closer, Control plus, and I am going to go in with a smaller brush so that I can go around the edges so that I don't, like, you know, get green in the glove area. Let's see, and those chartreuse green gloves really look nice against the green hoodie, like the chartreuse yellow. Looks really nice against the green hooded jacket she's wearing. And you can see I got all my layers here, right? This is exactly what you want. You want to make sure you have all these layers. You want to make sure you name all your layers so you know exactly what layer you're painting on these different layers here. So if you need to go back to that layer, guess what? Oop, I don't like that, so I'm going to undo that. Okay. Be a little more careful around this edge where the two colors meet. And okay. Keep very careful along this edge around the glove. I need to go in with a smaller brush. I'm just going to use my bracket key, and so I can go in closer. I'm going to go Control Plus, allows me to really get in close. So I don't have any white showing. I don't want any white showing. We don't want any white showing. Control minus, zoom out. We want to make sure we really fill this in nice and solid. So if you notice any areas that are kind of, you know, maybe not as dark as they could be, just go in and make sure you fill it in really good. Like right here, this edge here. Right here is like kind of a faded green. I want that to be darker green. Right here is like a faded green. Come right here. You can see this takes quite a bit of time to do this project. I'm going to go in a little bit of a lighter green here and a much smaller brush to kind of get to this edge here. A little bit bigger brush. Could use my, I got to fill that in there. I got to fill this in here. Make sure it's all filled in. Make sure all this is filled in good. Control minus and zoom out. And everything's been colored. So the next step is you're going to create 4 versions of this. Okay, so this is your first version. So you need to call this File, Save As, Pop Art. You can just call it PA Practice. Version 1. Okay, so PA Practice version 1, and make sure you have it saved in your pop art folder. Okay, you're going to want to create a pop art folder in your digital photo file in your documents. So in your documents, you're going to want to create a folder called pop art. Okay, so you're going to want to save it in there. So click on save. But I recommend that you save as you go along. Okay, so you need to make sure you save this as a PSD. I would start saving it almost immediately, because if the computer goes off, guess what happens? You lose all your work. So I would always be backing up my work. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and you're going to create another version by clicking on our adjustment layer here, the circle that's half white and half black. We're going to go to Hue Saturation, and what we're going to do is we're going to move our saturation down to 75. Okay, so make sure you have this set to 75, and we're going to go File, Save As, and we're going to call that version 2 and save. Okay. Now we're going to move this. We already had one at 0 because that was our original. So now we're going to move this down to 25. Or negative 25. Negative 25. Okay, negative 25. And if you feel like this looks too similar to the one you started with, then bring it down maybe even more to like 30 or 40, okay? If you feel like it's maybe too close to the first one you did. So then you're going to do File, Save As, and that's going to be version 3, and you're going to click on Save, click OK, and then the final one is going to be completely all the way to the end, at like negative. And if you need to lighten your image, you can always lighten it up a little bit if you want. So we're going to put this one at like, you know, it could be at 180 to like 160 or whatever. And I might lighten this just a tad bit, okay? I'm going to call that File, Save As, version 4. Save. So you're going to do 2 versions of this, okay? So then what you're going to do is you're going to go and open all those versions. We're going to open PA Practice 1, open PA Practice 2, and open PA Practice 3. So what we want to do is we want to look at them, but we want to look at them side by side. So we're going to go up to Window, and we're going to go to Arrange, and we're going to go to 4 Up. That's going to put them all side by side, but then I want you to zoom out on the image a little bit, so I want you to go Control minus and zoom out on the image a little bit. So you're going to click on each image, highlight it at the top, and zoom out a little bit. So, and Control minus and Control minus. So I want you to compare all 4 of these now. So let's look at this. So this is kind of now a kind of a chartreuse with an orange with a pink, and I want you. This is the red. This is the yellow. But this color here, it looks kind of similar to this one, doesn't it? They're almost the same green, so you may want to adjust this one a little bit. This is very different than this, and this is very different than, okay, so let's go into this image here, and let's see if maybe we need to just maybe slightly adjust that down even more, which I think that works a little more better, because now this is more of a yellow, and this is definitely more of a green, and that's definitely more of a pink, and that's definitely more of an orange. So these look very different from each other. So then I'm just going to save what I did to version 3, File, Save. Alright, so when you're done, you need to show these 4 versions to me, okay? So you need to call me over, and I need to look at them and check them, okay? Because the next step is something different. I'll have a different video tutorial for that. And you're not going to really need to do it with this particular image, but you will with your final image that you take a portrait of. You're going to take a portrait of somebody. You're going to ask someone to be your model. You're going to take a photo of them, and then you are going to turn that into a pop art, and it's going to look something like this when you're done. Okay?